She was not amused when, for instance, on the first day, two of the boys started dueling with their rulers. On nights before the school year started, Chris used to have bad dreams. Her principal would come to observe her, and her students would choose that moment to climb up on their desks and give her the finger, or they would simply wander out the door. But a child in her classroom would never know that Mrs. Zajac had the slightest doubt that students would obey her. The first day after going over all the school rules, Chris spoke to them about effort. "If you put your name on a paper, you should be proud of it," she said. "You should think, this is the best I can do, and I'm proud of it, and I want to hand this in." Then she asked, "If it isn't your best, what's Mrs. Zajac going to do?" Many voices, most of them female, answered softly in unison, "Make us do it over." "Make you do it over," Chris repeated. It sounded like a chant. "Does anyone know anything about Lisette?" she asked, when no one answered to that name. Felipe, small, with glossy black hair, threw up his hand. "Felipe?" "She isn't here," said Felipe. He wasn't being fresh. On those first few days of school, whenever Mrs. Zajac put the sound of a question in her voice, and sometimes before she got the question out, Felipe's hand shot up. In contrast, there was the very chubby girl who sat nearly motionless at her desk, covering the lower half of her face with her hands. As usual, most of their voices sounded timid the first day, and came out of hiding gradually. There were 20 children. About half were Puerto Rican. Almost 2/3 of the 20 needed the forms to obtain free lunches. There was a lot of long and curly hair. Some boys wore little rat tails. The eyes of the children lifted up to her as she went over the rules. A few eyes were blue, and many more were brown, looked so solemn and wide that Chris felt like dropping all pretense and laughing. Their faces ranged from dark brown to gold to pink to pasty white, the color that Chris associated with sunless tenements and too much TV. The boys wore polo shirts and T-shirts and new white sneakers with the ends of the laces untied and tucked behind the tongues. Some girls wore lacy ribbons in their hair, and some wore pants and others skirts, a rough but not infallible indication of religions. The Daughters of Jehovah's Witnesses and Pentecostals do not wear pants. There was a lot of prettiness in the room, and all of the children looked cute to Chris. So did the student teacher, Miss Hunt, a very young woman in a dress with a bow at the throat, who sat at a table in the back of the room. Miss Hunt had a sweet smile, which she turned on the children, hunching her shoulders when they looked at her. At times, the first days, while watching Chris in action, Miss Hunt seemed to gulp. Sometimes she looked as frightened as the children. For Chris, looking at Miss Hunt was like looking at herself 14 years ago. The smell of construction paper, slightly sweet and forest-like, mingled with the fading, acrid smell of roach and rodent spray. The squawk box on the wall above the closets, beside the clock with its jerky minute hand, erupted almost constantly, adult voices paging adults by their surnames and reminding staff of deadlines for the census forms, attendance calendars, and United Way contributions. Other teachers poked their heads inside the door to say hello to Chris, or to ask advice about how to fill out forms, or to confer with her on schedules for math and reading. In between interruptions, amid the usual commotion of the first day, Chris taught short lessons, assigned the children seat work, and attended to paperwork at her large gray metal desk over by the window. For moments then, the room was still. From the bilingual class next door to the south came the baritone of the teacher Victor Guevara, singing to his students in Spanish. Through the small casement windows behind Chris came sounds of the city, Holyoke, Massachusetts. Trailer truck brakes releasing giant sighs now and then, occasional screeches of freight trains, and always in the background the mechanical hum of ventilators from the school and from Din Brothers Trophies and Autron, from LeDuc Corporation, metal fabricators, and laminated papers. It was so quiet inside the room during those moments that little sounds were loud. The rustle of a book's pages being turned, and the tiny clanks of metal-legged chairs being shifted slightly. Bending over forms and the children's records, Chris watched the class from the corners of her eyes. The first day, she kept an especially close eye on the boy called Clarence. Clarence was a small, lithe, brown-skinned boy with large eyes and deep dimples. Chris watched his journeys to the pencil sharpener. They were frequent. Clarence took the longest possible route around the room, walking heel to toe and brushing the back of one leg with the shin of the other at every step. A cheerful little dance across the blue carpet, around the perimeter of desks and along the back wall, passing under the American flag which didn't quite brush his head. Reaching the sharpener, Clarence would turn his pencil into a stunt plane, which did several loop-the-loops before plunging in the hole. The first morning,